and welcome to the Journey to CEO Success. I'm your co host, Melissa Saunders, and I'm joined by Patrick Thean. He's an award winning serial entrepreneur, renowned CEO coach, and a best selling author recognized by the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. Patrick's latest book, The Journey to CEO Success, is a #1 Amazon bestseller and the inspiration behind this podcast. Patrick, it's great to have you here.
Hey, Melissa, it's good to be here, man.
Yeah, and today we're joined by Jamie Koff. She's the president and founder of Fabric to Finish. Jamie is a 30-year fashion industry expert who worked her way through the ranks at iconic brands like J.Crew, Tommy Hilfiger, and Polo. In 2006, she founded Fabric to Finish to give startup fashion entrepreneurs and idea makers a full service, turnkey back office solution to help them successfully launch and scale their own brands. I love this concept, Jamie, and I can't wait to hear more. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Jamie, first, again, thank you for coming on our show. And I'd love to start just with a couple of minutes. Tell us about your company. Tell us about Fabric to Finish. What do you actually do at Fabric to Finish?
Well, that's a great question. And that answer has evolved over the past nearly 20 years of operation. Initially I started the company just out of pure frustration from a previous employment experience. And it became this very nuanced full service incubator concept for independent, emerging designers and entrepreneurs, thought leaders to bring things from concept to cloth, and in our language, fabric to finish. What we handle in-house is everything imaginable under the sun as it relates to anybody that is bringing an idea to market, from original branding and logo and company DNA and, the kind of skeleton of the brand, all the way through to design, sourcing, product development, technical design, production management, global logistics operations, and website development, photo shoot, and back office Shopify support. So it's become a real full service soup to nuts operation because we realize the need in the market.
Yeah. You have a long lineage of fashion, right? I mean, I read your bio and all the way dating back to your grandfather. So long lineage, and then you started your career through all these different amazing brands. So how did you know you wanted to do this? I mean, was there pressure to get into this line of work, or was it just because you're so exposed to that, you just fell in love with it? Which one was it?
Well, interestingly enough, Patrick, quite the opposite. From a lineage perspective, all the way to my great grandparents were all tradespeople. So back in the Eastern European little towns, the little shtetls as they were called, they were seamstresses and upholsterers, worked with their hands, were not allowed into other professions just by the nature of what was going on in the world at that time via
Yes.
persecution, etc. And they all immigrated, escaping the persecution. And my maternal grandmother was the generation that found her way into this business through her grit and her, as we say, chutzpah. And they went from a cart and another cart to a storefront in Philadelphia down on 7th Street. And it skipped a generation. And, my parents were both medical professionals. My mom was a nurse. My father was a doctor. And on my paternal side, my grandfather was a pharmacist. And so it's not that it was frowned upon, but when I told my parents that I wanted to go to fashion school when it was time to start looking into colleges, they basically forbade me from applying to fashion school because they felt that it wasn't respectable profession,
Yeah.
or, you're never going to be able to support yourself. And I think that they were just trying to steer me in the direction of a different course that wasn't in the same way of the laborers that we all came from.
Yes.
So my passion was always in my blood. Can I say that it was in my DNA baked in? Absolutely. But I think as a young adult and a teenager, I was influenced at the time by what was our equivalent of social media, which was reading 17 magazine and seeing the birth of the supermodel and being enamored by the beauty and the intrigue and the mystery of the industry, and wanting to be a part of that because it was so romantic, not knowing really what anything was about or what happened on the back end.
So that's a wonderful story because, this podcast is about helping CEOs have a joyful and successful life. And the reason why I have joyful and successful is I think too many times I find people, very successful people sometimes sacrifice joy in life for success. And I've been a proponent of having your cake and eating it at the same time. And I always say, why would I buy a cake just so that somebody else can eat it? No. I want to have my cake. I want to have the success, but I want to enjoy it. And I don't think life is great if you've had great success and you end up in life, with lonely and unhappy. So I emphasize joy as much as I emphasize success. And it sounds like you discovered the passion, whether it was in your DNA or not, by the magazines, falling in love with the fashion models. That's just wonderful. So but you did it though, even though your parents tried to dissuade you,
Mhm.
you did it anyway. Tell us about that. Was that difficult? It must have been difficult. I say that because, parents always do that. No, I should say always, but my dad was a very successful lawyer and actually in Singapore he became a judge. But he also dissuaded me from law. It's like a great profession. I said, Dad, I want to be a lawyer just like you. He said to me, don't do that, son. Lawyers don't have the respect that we used to have. And I'm like, why'd you do that? Anyway, so my dad did the same thing. He
Yeah.
dissuaded me from being a
Yeah.
lawyer. It's kind of funny.
Well,
You know,
to be honest with you, the question was it difficult? So I resonate with what you said because I think that it's the same sentiment of the parent just wanting their children to do better than them. And even though your father was a successful judge and a
yeah.
successful professional, he probably was trying to steer you in a direction by way of not telling you why and just encouraging. And I think that that was very similar in my in my household. For me, to be honest with you, as I reflect back, I don't think that was a difficult time. I went to GW. I was told, go get a proper liberal arts education and then decide. And I
Mm,
thought that I was on the path to law school, speaking of lawyers. And I interned at a big IP law firm outside of DC. I took the LSAT. I did horribly. And I was discouraged because I said, well, wait a minute, maybe that's a sign. And it wasn't until my senior year of my, second semester where I actually met with a career advisor at GW campus. And the question that they asked me was very pivotal. And I share this with a lot of the students that I mentor now, which is, what are you passionate about?
yes.
Because if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to enjoy it. And I said out loud, well, there's two things that I'm very passionate about. One is the fashion industry. And believe it or not, the other was tricks because I was raised in a family that had, great grandparents that we visited until until she was 101. I was
Wow.
surrounded by going to these places that a lot of people were scared to go. And as a child, I was very comfortable. So I said, here's two things. I interviewed at certain, senior citizen homes. I'm like, that's not my path. Fashion is my path. And I just hardcore networked my way up to New York. There was no internet. I had to go to the GW Gelman Library and go through all the volumes of companies that I knew about, like the big ones at the time, Liz Claiborne, Ralph Lauren. Janssen was a big swimwear company. There was no big, small independent brands back then. And I literally cold called and faxed cover letters. And I networked my way up to New York and found myself as a production coordinator at J.Crew by accident. And that's kind of where it all started.
That's how life is. I mean, oftentimes you got to just push, try, send out 100 cover letters, and then things happen, right? Jim Collins actually calls this return on luck. Like you have to create the right things to have good fortune come your way. And I think fortune always favors the bold and the well prepared. Congratulations.
Well, thanks. And I noticed I learned a lot about myself when I look back to those years about the foundation of me being a super networker and a super connector. I mean, as the story goes, somehow I found who the head of human resources was at J. Crew. I found out the fax number. I faxed them. I was coming up to New York to interview with Macy's as the buying program and Bloomies, and I did not get accepted there. Hint, hint. And I came back to my apartment to grab my luggage to take a train from Union Station in DC to get a voicemail from who would be my future boss at J.Crew saying, "Hey, we hope we didn't miss you." And it was one of those real cheap $5 answering machines where you couldn't call in to check your messages. And had I not come home to get my bag,
I've seen it. Yeah,
I wouldn't have known and I would have missed the opportunity. So I think it was kismet and it was meant to be.
totally, totally.
And that's kind of where it all started.
Totally. Let me switch gears on you a little bit. I was interested in how you said something earlier about how you started this company, and it sounded like the catalyst for to start this company was a bad boss. If I heard you correctly, did I hear you correctly?
It wasn't a bad boss. It was a bad corporate experience.
Bad experience somewhere. So
Yep.
I feel like you weren't the person that said, I gotta have my own company, but you were probably an entrepreneur that was just waiting for a catalyst to ignite that power in you. And so in this case, it was a bad corporate experience. Tell us about that. Like for a lot of people, it's very hard to go start something. So how did that happen for you?
Well, I had, interestingly enough, tried previously. I'd always been an entrepreneur. Even in high school, I was very crafty and I made, sculpty clay was very popular and you bake it in the oven. And I would make barrettes and pins and brooches and I would sell it to like my teachers and my peers. And it was nothing. It wasn't anything. It was like a little home Etsy kind of situation.
Yes.
And then fast forward, when I was in between jobs, I started to say, well, maybe I can build a bag line, maybe I can. And I started to foundationally put design boards together and start networking and sourcing. And I hired an intern, and that was just a learning curve. It was just a very big starting point of, wow, I keep talking about this and I should do this. And then I went back into full-time employment. And so that stopped. But what basically happened, I was working for a company that was my former colleagues from my past professional experience. And it was a French owned company that opened a New York office base for designer children's wear licensing. And after 2 years of kind of starting that up, it kind of went belly up and it was not anything that was in my control. And it literally was a close the door, send everybody home
Yeah.
experience. And that's when I really woke up and said, I got to do something. And that was really the catalyst. Additionally, what I found was that I knew that I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure how to package it. And when I left that experience where the company shut down abruptly and I was networking for my next career change and new job, is when I realized that a lot of doors were closing when I was pitching the idea of let me consult for you, let me try and build this out for you as a fractional person, which at the time was a little bit of a
Oh,
novelty, right? Companies
goodness.
were
Back then,
multi-layered.
that wouldn't exist,
Yeah.
fractional person. No. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was trying to bring value in a way that they weren't ready to absorb. And so that's when I had I guess, my aha moment, which was I want to be valuable to people. I want to be a need. And these big companies clearly don't need me or my
Mm.
ideas. So I'm going to go and pivot 180 and find those that do need me and that need to depend on me, which was those that didn't know any better, the independents, the startups, random dentist, doctor, stay at home mom that had a great idea for a brand, but were completely unembedded in the industry to figure out how to facilitate all of that. Um,
So,
and
you found what I call your core customer. I find so many people waste time trying to chase all customers when really, if they figured out who would really need their stuff and love working with them and focus on that group of people, I call that your core customer. It sounds like you found that core customer really early.
well, and I hate to use the phrase I stepped in shit, but I did because I think fundamentally, and because I wasn't schooled in it and I don't have an MBA, I think my gut is my GPS.
Yes.
Right. And so I do listen to myself a lot. We as leaders, individuals, professionals, whether you're an employed individual or you're self-employed, I think that a lot of people lose sight of your senses. And that's what I
Yes.
really just honed in on. And that's when I had that, aha, the light bulb went on and I said, that's who I'm going to target. And what I did was, at the time, I think revolutionary, because I was swimming upstream against the current, working with, listen, I had red carpets rolled out for me when I went overseas on my buying trips. I sat
Yes.
in the room when
Yeah, because
I,
you work for these great brands, right?
when they have the head of the Tommy women's, fabric department coming over, there's a table of 20 executives there serving you tea, taking you out. And it's a very unique experience and humbling to say, I'm starting this and I don't have 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 yard orders or 1,500 piece garment orders. Can you help me? Do you want to do this? Can I count on you? Because I'm breaking through to a part of the industry that's underserved. And these people have great talent, great ideas, and 9 out of 10 times they're well financed. So let's do it. And so my vendors that I'm still in touch with, still friends with, and still doing business with from my early Tommy days in the early 90s are still part of my matrix. And it's the relationships and the trust that, they said, we know that you're going to do great by this. And so there were a couple hiccups, obviously, but that's really the foundation of it, to have the trusted network and build on that and build those, the building blocks on how to make it a functional embedded system.
So tell me about your core customer. In other words, who is that person that today? So update me to today now. Like, who is that person that truly needs your stuff that you would love to work with? So I always say, look, it's no point serving customers you dislike. In fact, I think it's hard to really care for and take good care of customers you don't enjoy. So you clearly enjoy these folks. But to me, a core customer is someone that really needs your stuff, someone that you can also grow with in the future. Like I said, you have seemed to have discovered that early. I'm curious whether that core customer has changed at all. And so tell me about your core customer today. What's your core customer today?
That's a good question. Well, and I've certainly read a lot of books and did my time. And what I learned, the customer is still the same. It's still I have a couple different lanes that we can operate in. The one is the newbie who has an idea. They found us at the right time before they made a mistake, right? And they're very open and they're a sponge and they're malleable and they understand that this is a really big journey that we're about to go on. Most importantly, one of the classifications that I have, a mandate, they either have to say it out loud or acknowledge it when I say it on one of our intro calls, is that they must admit that they know what they don't know.
Mm.
First and foremost, that criteria has changed from the beginning
How do
because, of
you figure that
course,
out? What question do you ask that helps you identify them to say, I know what I don't?
it's a tough one because, I'm pretty ballsy when it comes to digging in.
Yes.
I'm very familiar. I'm an emotional leader. I get into, feelings over facts initially because I really am a relationship person and I want to feel safe with the person. I want them to feel safe with me. I give them a lot of airtime in the beginning, which a lot of other companies don't. I think there's great value in that. So what do I ask them? It shifts, to be honest. I have to pick up on the personality. When I sense that someone is steamrolling, I back off and I just let them pave a path and I'm not interested. I
Gotcha.
don't say generally what I would have said in the past.
Yeah.
Recently I had a call with somebody that was referred to me. I knew they were not the right match. I call it a charity case. I took the call and they were ill equipped and they came on very, very strong and very much blowing up their story. I went on the website, I looked at the socials. Things were very underwhelming in my professional opinion. They were not super established. And great. They have a great opinion of themselves. It's wonderful. Let them have that character. And when I start to ask questions to peel away layers and it starts to be very transparent and not what they represent, is when I get to say in that storyline, so and so, I don't think we're the right partner for you. And I'm going to tell you why. Because for me, I'm not avoidant in my communication style, my attachment style. I need to know. I'm a words of affirmation gal. I need to
Mm.
know I doing a good job? How's my driving? Like, I feel like I have
Yes.
that sticker on the back of my blazer every day when I work, right? And so I identify early on, which I'm grateful for because my spidey sense, my gut is speaking to me more in a very different, elevated way than it was in the beginning, where it was, sure, come on in. I need the business.
Yes.
Of course, will take you and realize that, you're going to be a total a-hole and I will deal with it because I need to
Yeah.
put names on the roster. But that's no longer the case. I have to identify a couple of criteria. Number one, do you know what you don't know? And can you talk about it? Can you comfortably say, listen, I'm a dentist, but I have a need for X, Y, and Z, right? Like, great example. We launched a brand with a phenomenal partner. She's a board certified dermatologist and really wanted to bring fashion into her world as a
Mhm.
benefit and a safeguard to her patients with UPF 50 plus and sun protective apparel. Fashion forward, functional, feminine, but she's a doctor. She doesn't know from high hip, low hip, front rise, back
Yeah.
rise. She doesn't know from jersey versus interlock construction. She doesn't know from chlorine testing versus sea salt testing on fabrics and stretch and recovery. So she was very transparent from the front, where she was, I need you.
Mm.
I'm going to stay in my lane. I have very specific aesthetic preferences, but you go and do your magic, because
Yeah.
that's what it's no different. I'm not going to go into her office and say, here's how I think that you should remove that mole. Like, it doesn't, so I think in some cases I've noticed over the years, Patrick, that I think many entrepreneurs and many people think fashion is this real DIY dumb industry, which, by the way, goes back to why mom and dad probably didn't want me going into it, because they didn't think it was really, a respectable field where you actually had to learn and do. These individuals that come in steamrolling really think that it's IKEA and that they can go in, buy a box, assemble it, hang it up
Mm.
on a wall, and think, poof, I'm in
Yeah.
business. But it's not like that. And so, if that's an indicator, I think that's really where the shift has happened over the past decade, of when I can kind of smell someone's bullshit coming in on the phone and I just let them ride, or I kind of say, hey, here's how we operate. Let me know if that resonates with you, because the success that we're able to accomplish has to be based on certain things, and it's a two-way street.
So it sounds like you're being very practical here. It's not just about when someone is steamrolling and stuff like that. You're identifying a few things. You're thinking this person needs to really know what they don't know, because that allows me to do the work that I need to do for them, right? Versus them thinking that they know better than you, and you just need to go do three things for me and we're good, we're done, right? So it sounds like number one, that's important to you. But also secondly, I'm also hearing you say, look, I enjoy serving these folks. So again, this podcast is about helping people discover joy and success at the same time. And I think you've figured out that, look, it's important for you to serve customers you enjoy. Otherwise, your journey is not going to be that joyful. I mean, if all you were, if you're serving customers that are a-holes, as you put it, your word, not mine. Thank you for giving me that liberty today. But but it's tough and it's hard work and it's not bringing you joy. The day gets long, right? But you're serving people that you enjoy, who need your stuff, who are authentic, who want help. I think those are the things you're looking for in your core customer. But you
Yeah.
also said launching brands. So you don't work for the big brands. You really work for people who are launching stuff, who don't know that much, who really need your expertise.
Yeah. Well, so part of the business model, as I was kind of intimating earlier, that we have a couple different avenues. Now there's kind of a lane of those. I'm starting from scratch and I need you and I'm ready to dive in. And then we've got the other lane, which is, I call the rescue and recovery mission, because they've made a bad decision.
Hmm.
And not that it was by choice. They stepped in a situation that they probably were looking to save a penny and wound up spending more in time, in cost.
Yes.
And as I go in, I have to fix someone else's work a lot. And it's traumatizing for them. And a lot of
Yes.
these individuals that are not coming from the industry per se. They are coming from being just natural humans and being educated and having a great idea for a jeans brand or a kids sock brand or some new functional performance something or other. And they elected to be maybe penny wise and pound foolish in hindsight. And now they need help fixing it. And I notice a lot of blaming and finger pointing. And I just have to listen and be diplomatic and do a, as I call it, one of my mentors taught me this phrase, the bloodless autopsy. I have to go under the hood and really look inside and say, Joan, your factory really was not the problem. The specs are correct. Unfortunately, XYZ, I think would help to remedy this. And so then that's where we build. And there's so many stories where I've had to kind of pick people up out of the ashes because, as I said, they think initially that it's IKEA and that they know somebody who knows somebody whose dog walkers worked in some fashion company for 2 minutes and recommended some remote factory in Shenzhen, China, thinking that was the golden ticket.
Yeah. And even in that case, I would suggest, I could be wrong, but I would suggest that that person may have started off thinking they know everything. Unfortunately, have met with mishap in the business, and they're probably now like, I need help now. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing after all. And again, it comes back to that willingness to say, look, I've now realized I don't know I now know what I don't know, and I need you to help save me. So I think at the end of the day, it comes back to that same characteristic of looking for help, understanding that they don't know, they may not even know the solution, but they just know that they need help now. And that's when you step in. So Jamie, I could spend all day talking with you, but there are two questions I got to ask you before we go. So I'm going to change gears on you. The first one is, if I put you in a time machine with all the knowledge you have and you go way back, you go back to some point in time in your earlier career, what advice would you give yourself now, knowing the journey you've already had? What would you say to that younger version of yourself?
My gut first tells me to say, you're going to be okay, right? As I think about, the directions from, the parents. But the time machine is, don't trust everybody, trust your gut and stop beating yourself up. It's not your fault that they're an asshole. I mean, period. I think that applies to a lot along my journey of being self-employed, raising a company, launching, managing staff, dealing with many personalities and entities outside around the world. But I think I would give myself a big pat on the back and a big hug and say, congratulations. You always had it in you. And while you might have tripped and fell and skinned your knee along the way, and you have the scars to show it, look where you are now and be grateful. So how's that for an answer?
That's great. Thank you.
Great.
And so this is my last question. And this question I ask all my guests, right? This podcast is about helping CEOs have a joyful and successful life. So what advice would you like to leave with our audience, these CEOs, to help them have a more joyful and successful life?
Well, work-life balance is real. That's for sure. I make the time to do great things, but whether it's health and wellness and get my Soul Cycle bikes booked on Monday at noon so that I know that I'm going to be sweating in the room, dancing with everybody a couple of times a week. But I think as it relates to the business model for a joyful life, I think just remember that the worst experiences are the greatest lessons. And it's a short term burn for a long term haul. And I think we all as leaders and even as humans have to remind ourselves of that often because it's hard out there. It's hard out there in the world right now, geopolitically, you know, and in the industries that we all work in, it's shifting so rapidly how things are done. But we have to give ourselves a big hug, a lot of grace, a lot of self-respect, and just stand firm and believe in ourselves and don't waver.
Great. Jamie, thank you so much. Melissa, back to you.
Yeah, wow. That's a wrap. Thank you, Jamie, for being here today, sharing that amazing story. Until next time, go out there. Don't be afraid to fall down. Maybe you scrape your knee, like Jamie says, but always get up and enjoy this beautiful journey we're on. Until next time, bye.